Welcome to TOTC Cocktail 2021. I'm so happy to be here talking with you all about a topic that is not only becoming more and more relevant and newsworthy, but something that is both actionable and enjoyable. When I first heard that this year would be centered on the topic of community, I thought not only about our direct human communities, but our natural communities as well. And over the past 4 years, I've been working on and developing Aberfeldy Barrels and Bees, a global initiative where we pair bartenders up with beekeepers to learn more about honey, that beloved ingredient behind your bar, using better honey in mixed drinks, and how changing up this honey can completely change up your cocktails. And Aberfeldy Scotch, with its honeyed richness, pairs perfectly with it. We also look at not only how bees make honey, taking bartenders out to delve into hives, but rest assured they are in beekeeper outfits, and how we can make sure that there is enough food for these bees as well, meaning how can we plant the pollinators? And that's where we're at today, because 2 years ago at Tales of the Cocktail, myself and some incredible queen bees presented on From Hive to Highball, how we can use honey and different styles of honey in mixed drinks, and sort of beekeeping 101 from the great Maggie Campbell. This year, as an evolution to this, I'm joined by some new queen bees, a new hive, to talk specifically about gardening and how this can help ourselves, our communities, our venue offerings, and of course, our pollinators too. Before we go any further as well, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Aberfeldy, for making this happen today, and also to the Tales of the Cocktail team, because organisation, tireless sort of work, we wouldn't be here without you. So thank you to everyone who has made not only Tales of the Cocktail happen, but carrying that spirit forward year on year. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my queen bees, my panelists in this session. So first up, I've got Keyatta Mincey-Parker, who has a diverse background of over 20 years in the food service industry. She's always had a love of creativity and been insanely creative, and she's fully been able to put this into practice recently as the founder of A Sip of Paradise Garden, a 501c3 non-profit bartender garden in Atlanta, as well as the Gym Project, her foundation that focuses on training young women back in Liberia in hospitality and bar culture. With her on the same screen, you'll see her duo is with Rori Robinson, the Director of Gardening and Development at A Sip of Paradise. She's got a deep-rooted love of gardening, and even the title Director of Gardening, God, I'd love something like that. It's brilliant. Also based in Atlanta, she is the founder as well of Bloom Bar Garnish Company, plant-based products for drinks of all kinds, and Bloom Bar Beverage Service. Then we've got Sarah. Now, Sarah and I have been working together for years, and she is my font of wisdom for everything planting related, and responsible for helping me on my pollinator journey. She's one half of Bermondsey Street Bees, beekeepers, apicultural consultants, and creators of sustainably produced raw English honey, which is delicious, which they supply to some of the best chefs and bartenders across London. She's also a trained honey sommelier, a columnist for leading beekeeper magazines, and has written a worldwide published book, Planting for Honeybees. And then finally, as a little introduction to myself, my name is Georgie. I am the head of advocacy for our incubation brands here at Bacardi. I'm a whiskey nerd through and through, but also have a huge love of beekeeping, and I'm part of Pollinating London Together as well, which is an initiative aimed at making London much more inviting, a greener space for our pollinators that fly around us. So together, we believe that nature is often the cure. And so we want to use the next 50 minutes or so to pass our passion of the outside to you as we discuss the numerous benefits and enjoyments of gardening and being part of and building a community gardening project. Now, human connection and fresh air are needed now more than ever before. The mental and physical well-being lift from being at one with our environment is second to none. And by wielding your trowel and nurturing seeds that you can physically see come to life, you're not only benefiting yourself, but you're also benefiting your lived environment as well. You immediately take a stance on shared improvement in your community and the desire to bring people together outside in nature. And we're here to tell you that anyone can do that. Anyone has the space to be a gardener, whether it's a couple of empty window boxes outside your bar or apartment, a planter, a rooftop, a space for gardening beds. We're also going to talk a little bit about guerrilla gardening as well in this session. These are all opportunities to transform empty space into your own gardening give back project, to give back to yourself and a give back to others. Now, in research for this presentation, I was lucky enough to speak with Alan Holm, a friend of Sarah's who set up Urban Organics, a platform to help a wide range of people to use gardening and beekeeping as a therapeutic tool. His aim is to bring people closer to nature. And when we spoke, he talked gardening as a level playing field, which I thought was fantastic. He works with people from all walks of life, and gardening is, excuse the pun, the common ground. Disabled, blind, young, old, everyone gets as much out of it, and it's often just a chatting experience, he said. But gardening is often in his community groups the main focus, but the main distraction. When you pick up a trowel or gardening gloves, there's no judgment. Your role, your background, everything disappears, and it's just about the task at hand. Not only are you getting closer to nature, but you're also detaching from technology, something that I think we all need help with actually. And it helps to empty your mind in a mindful way. There's also something incredibly fulfilling about planting something from seed and watching it grow. Eating tomatoes off a plant that just started this big, that you've cultivated, and then also seeing bees take energy and pleasure from shrubs and flowers that you've also nurtured and put into the ground. With that in mind, because I'm definitely not the main event here, I'm going to pass to Keyatta and Rori from A Sip of Paradise in Atlanta, who not only know and live the above, but have extended it to others within their bartender communities. So I'm hoping that they'll share with us their story about A Sip of Paradise garden. And I believe they also have some steps as to how to set up your own community garden following this presentation.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Keyatta Mincey-Parker. I'm a Liberian American bartender based in Atlanta, Georgia. And I started A Sip of Paradise garden as a project, as a part of a project for the Canvas project for Bombay Sapphire Most Imaginative Bartender. It was my third time going out for MIB. I really wasn't wanting to go for it. I was like, I'm 40, I tried 2 times. I don't know, I might have one in me, but I'm not gonna put too much into it. So it was one of those things when I submitted a cocktail. It was a cocktail called Eve's Pot Liquor. It was a collard green and green apple cocktail. And who knew? Who knew? A cocktail that told the story of my African father and my Southern Belle mother got me to top 12 in London for a whole week. I visited Kew Gardens. Like, it was just a beautiful experience. And it was also empowering because I was one of 5 women and I was the only Black woman, a Black person actually, to get that far. And it was empowering, it was stressful, it was scary, it was all these things, but I had to think of the big picture. I wanted to do something you know, to support us. There's nothing really for us. And it made sense to have a bartenders community garden. It all came together. The land was gifted to us from an organization I had done a lot of work with before. Rori, who I actually met at one of these events because we met at Red Place Rori, was someone I stalked as well. She's an avid gardener. She and her partner, they just do these amazing and beautiful things in their space. And she was taking all these pictures. So when everything was coming together to put my team together, it only made sense. One, she's my friend. Two, she's a badass. And three, you know, she actually knows about gardening. So she could be she could actually help me do this, you know, instead of just being fun and hanging out. And we put together a team and I went off to the finals in February. I came in either second or third. I never really remember. I know I didn't win. So I didn't win the money and all these things. And I came home, I was like, well, we didn't win. Maybe I'll just hold off for a year and plan it. And Rori and the other girls were like, oh, what? Wait for a year for what? Right. No,
let's go.
No, we got land, you know, we got people that are interested. And what do you mean? We'll get money later. Let's do it. So I was like, oh, okay. So we started planning to do it and we started making small steps and then Corona happened. And then nobody knew what any of that meant. Everybody was getting furloughed. People were like, okay, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna eat? What am I gonna, like, nobody knew what they're gonna do. And after the initial week or so of the shock, people were like, okay, I can't just sit at home and drink this away. We gotta do something. So people started texting like, hey, that gardening thing's still going on? Hey, are we still doing this? And then I'm like, okay, we should do this. And all of a sudden we had people that were like, I don't have to do a little work today. Let's go. So different brands sponsored volunteer days and we got the land cleared out. We got everything mapped out. Rori, Stephanie, my team, everybody just came together and we mapped this out and everybody was interested and we were able to provide a safe space. We were able to provide an area where people could escape the noise of the virus, the protesting, everything that was happening in our city, because our city was feeling it. We were a hot pocket because we were a red state fighting to be blue. People were protesting, there was violence and all these things were happening, but it seemed like when you got to a Sip of Paradise Garden, nothing mattered. That was your bubble, that was your safe space. And I was so happy to provide that and provide a little bit of something. You know, you can still talk about cocktails if you want, you can still see someone you worked with. You can, you know, you can have something or you can just do whatever you want. And we were happy to provide that for people and it bloomed into this. And now we are in our second year. We have 43 plots right now, 36 members. We have a waiting list. We have plots for members. We have amazing sponsorships with local farms. We donate to local fridges around the community. We work with a solar panel company. Like we've developed and created all these relationships, as well as created extra jobs for these bartenders who weren't sure what they were going to do. People always are, you know, we're always the root and the brunt of everything. And this was finally a place where we were actually being heard and understood and respected and having our own. And it felt good.
Felt amazing.
It felt really good.
And it's been so wonderfully and positively received by everyone who's learned about the organization or has come out to the space, and just seeing the individual member plots and just how we've really changed the landscape, both aesthetically and the feel of the grounds there. Because before Keyatta established the grounds there, it was just grown over patch of land not being used for the past 5 years. So
yeah, it sat dormant.
It was, yeah, it was an eyesore to that little central part of the neighborhood, which is an active part of East Atlanta Village, because that's where the community farmers market is held a few feet behind us in the paved area. And there are always open market fests and festivals and things of that nature. So not only has the garden provided a safe haven for us, the directors and the members, but the community members now have something nice to walk through and check out. We're always seeing people out there admiring the plant,
talking to us,
asking,
wanting to volunteer.
Absolutely, asking about who we are, what they can do to help. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
And now we have been put in a position that people want us to create more edible garden spaces. So we're branching into that to continue to beautify our city, our state. And now also my dream from the beginning in starting SIP was to have multiple SIP gardens, bartender gardens in different cities because it's needed. Happy bartenders, better cocktails. How amazing is it to know exactly where everything comes from that you're putting in someone's glass? Or you have the ability to heal yourself with these herbs, these flowers, with everything you're growing. You have that power in your hand. You can be on your own time, and everyone needs that.
Yeah.
And there's a big call for that. We've been asked to do this in San Francisco, as well as Texas, Chicago, and New York. So this thing has exploded bigger than any of us dreamed, and is now I'm able to create end game for people. Like, you know, in my 40s, I love bartending. It was probably one of the best careers I've ever had in my life, but it's a physical job. And my end game, and for me to be more impactful, would be something else. And this is a way for me to do that and provide that opportunity for others. And I'm just happy I get to play in the dirt with my friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
and
that's it.
I can totally relate to that because I've always loved bartending or tending bar. And before I started tending bar, I was a server for, you know, years before that for casual fine dining. But the end game for me in the restaurant sense was never to be a manager or anything, but I always wanted to get behind the bar because that's always the lifeblood of the restaurant or whatever venue you're at. And I always enjoyed creating something new. Like I like learning about the alcohol and tasting drinks, of course, and the social aspect of it. But for me, the top priority has always been about creating something new from, you know, whatever resources I have at my fingertips. And as Keyatta stated, last year when COVID shut everything down and I was out of work for sure for a solid 3 months, transitioning to the garden, you know, as a director of development and getting those grounds together served as the perfect transition from being behind the stick to, you know, being outside, because I still missed that energy, that adrenaline. Like I like moving, I like creating, I like doing things, you know, with my hands, especially related to food and beverage. So A Sip of Paradise was the perfect bridge into what I'm doing now. And now with the success of how the organization has blown up in just this past year, you know, we're both confident with the fact that we'll never be going back to hitting bar full time again. You know, that's just
unless we want to.
You know, as Georgie mentioned at the top of the presentation, I did start Bloom Bar Beverage Service, which is my own private kind of consulting and private event bartending. So I can get that fix when I want to, but it's very much on a, you know, my own terms, you know, the hours I want to work, the money I want to make, you know, the quality of, you know, just the atmosphere, you know, things I want to do, you know, no more late nights, no more $2.13 an hour. You know, I don't know how the pay scale works in Europe exactly, but you know, here it's mostly low hourly wage, you know, plus tips. And it's just like, it's a very lucrative industry, but you know, when it isn't, you know. So, you know, when it comes to quality of life, the money aspect isn't that much of a draw. You know, when we can't build together and create a need for these resources for our industry professionals that hadn't been there before, you know, it's a no-brainer. I would of course rather be a part of something like this than to, you know, be closing down a bar until 4 a.m., you know, somewhere, and then have to turn around and do it again the next day. And then on top of that, we've also learned how to really practically use the things that we are growing in this garden. One key example is, in addition to Bloom Bar Beverage Service, I started Bloom Bar Garnish Company, and it's a line of like syrups and sugar and salt blends. Here we've got like a savory salt blend for food and beverages, but all of the herbs that are using that product come from either a Sip of Paradise garden or my home garden. And then if we still need more, then we start outsourcing to like our local farmers and nurseries. But just things like that. This is something I never would have had the gumption to just get up and do, 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Or honestly, last year, had I not been forced out from behind the bar because, COVID kind of shut everything down. So a Sip of Paradise has been not only just for me, but it's for most of our members. It's been a wonderful resource to have in such trying times. And now that things are transitioning to slowly getting better and then maybe getting a little worse, who knows, but getting better again, it's nice to have this as an outlet for creative expression, mental well-being,
Yes.
just a quiet place where you don't have to drink to be social with your industry friends. We can do a healthy and creative, if you're feeling activity altogether, outside.
Although that being said, I have seen some pictures of you with gardening with cocktails.
Well, now we are
bartenders.
still
We are
a bartender's garden.
Yes.
We can't imagine having an event where we're asking people to come out and have fun and maybe do a little donating and not have at least one cocktail offering. But we also always offer mocktail options as well. And we always have a nice little fruity infused water too. So we cover all the bases.
I think it's awesome, and I think it's such a wonderful story about how it started, and not only the fillingness you get, but as you just mentioned, you are growing ingredients that you can then use in other products as well, not just behind the bar, but in syrups and salts, etc. Now, obviously, you've made it sound smooth sailing, but I know it probably hasn't been. But I believe we've got some tips, your top tips to how to set up a community garden for others, so that other people out there can also hopefully create their own little sip of paradise or little slice or soil of paradise wherever they are.
So my top 10 tips for planning your own community garden. And you want to think in community, you're thinking more than one person. So these would be more so for several people to come together. So my first step is to plan, and plan some more, because one thing I've learned in this, there's no straight path to any of this. Community gardens, the regulations on them are different or non-existent. So you can kind of almost do what you want to do. So write it all down, map down all your details, find out why you're doing this. What's your purpose? What's the reasoning? Is this just for your friends, for y'all are all vegetarian and you all having to bartend, or just whatever the reason is, figure out the one reason and write it all down, map your details out and figure out who this is for. Second, I want to say, and I know Rori will agree with me with this one, know your planting zone.
Right.
Know your planting zone. Very important. That's a universal tool. And I also just realized that it's actually global. You can look up what planting zone you're in the world. Georgia is between 7 and 9, but Atlanta is between 7B and 8A. So looking that up, you can know when to plant, what to plant, like the succession rate you'll get in that. So that's a big deal as well, because it goes based off the weather, and you can kind of map out how your growing season is going to be.
Yeah, and also the cold hardiness of your plants. Like, it doesn't do you any good planting, a plant that would not thrive in the climate conditions in where you live. It can discourage you from gardening because you think you're just not doing it right, when initially it's not your fault. You're just not planting the right thing for the zone that you live in. Yeah.
Exactly. Number 3, no one can do this alone. I know I'm a rebel, I'm strong, I'm this, I'm that. This is a lot. No one can do this alone. Make sure you put yourself together with people that kind of share your work ethic, your beliefs, just people that want to do it, or even if it's just something totally fun, make sure you have the right people around you that keep you going. Make sure you get together. I want to say between 5 and 10, because some people will fall off, because some people, the deeper you get into it, will realize that this may not necessarily be for them. But just make sure you have a group of people that all are kind of like mind, so you all have the same vision and map this out together. You can't do this by yourself.
And also include people with resources that you don't have. You
True.
know, don't just have a bunch of all of us being novices out there. Let's at least contact 1 or 2 persons who has experience
with something,
whatever we're trying to do. Yeah, building a garden from scratch, especially a community garden, it's imperative to have somebody who has either done this before or who can put you into the right direction with, you know, all the ins and outs, the details of laying that groundwork, especially with the spacing out and size and setting up watering systems, all of that stuff. Like, if you don't know it, make sure you find yourself someone who does.
Exactly. Which goes to our next one, choose your site. So depending on where you are, there are cities that governments have different land that is non-useful to them for anything. And a lot of times they will set out these leases with people that want to have gardens or a beautified space. There's also churches, there's also nonprofits, there's also private citizens. You know, just do your research, ask out there, but a lot of times I'm sure Sarah will explain how it is in the UK as far as land and how you're able to do stuff there. I know you two can speak on that, but I know here, you know, the land here is plentiful, but it's not plentiful. Like, there's land out there for things, but you have to ask and you have to kind of look for it. So that's the plus and the minus for it. So do your research, and it's there. It's totally there, but make sure wherever you have, make sure you fully think about how you can use the entire space, especially if you're only leasing something for a few years. You know, you want to think how much and how to think the best way to get the best out of all of it in all of that time. Let's see, number 5, determine your rules and your structures. Some of us don't like rules. Don't tell me what to do. You're not my mom. We need rules. We need them. We need structure. As much as you think you don't, you do. Because for everything that you're setting up, you want to put these in place so it continues. Are you going to charge fees? What kind of gardening are you going to do? Or is it going to be allotment style? Everyone have their own plot, or is it a full community situation? Everybody working in together, building sweat equity. You know, are you going to use, what kind of products are you going to use on this? No chemicals at all. You know, you want to set all these things up. Can pets be there? You know, you want to put all these things in place and get it in writing. And when you get these people that are going to be a part of this, have them sign it. So you don't even have to have a conversation. If someone breaks one of the rules, you're like, well, you signed this. So you're kind of holding people accountable for that. And again, it's one of those things, just set the rules up and have conversations about the rules, because if one person is just setting up these rules, it kind of sounds like a dictatorship when you all are kind of in it all together. Block out the noise. Number 6, this is a good one. It's a lot of people that may or may not tell you they think it's a great idea, they think it's a terrible idea. Just anything that isn't helping you to keep going and keeping you encouraged, block it out, because there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of noise, and you don't want to get caught into that because it's very distracting and it'll take away from your goal and your vision. You don't want anybody to take that away, because this is a big project. Get it all in writing. So that's number 7. If someone's like, say you walk into a land and you're like, oh my God, this is a beautiful space, you find out who it is, and you're like, you know what, you can do your garden here as long as you want to. That sounds really great. What happens if this person passes away and a family member is like, I don't want this, shut it down? Or what happens if, you know, they lose their home? Like, what happens? It's always good to get it in writing, and it's not, a person who truly wants to give this to you is not going to feel offended by you saying, hey, this sounds really wonderful, but can we get this in writing? Can we sign this up? And even with the land that we have a memo of understanding, and we have it in writing. As long as I'm breathing, I can have this space to do this.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. And it's not anything we had to draft lawyers and all this stuff. It was just simply stated, we signed it, we agree on this date until the end of life, my life or whoever's life, we can have this space to do this. And it's just that simple. But just protect yourself, protect that person, and get it all in writing. in fact, even if people want to volunteer, just it's a verbal commitment, it's some kind of commitment to hold them accountable. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Number 8, have some business about this garden. So if you're going to take the route that we took to be a nonprofit and be a registered business, I fully agree with that, because gardening is business. If people want to donate and work with you, they want to know that you are legitimate. They want to make sure you're not some fly-by-night person. I'm donating $500 to this person, and they show up and everything's abandoned. Like they need some measure of something from you. So have some business about yourself.
Yeah.
You know, register it as a business, or your social media, or just decide on what it is. Put together maybe a committee, a gardening committee. You know, just put these pieces together so you can legitimize yourself, and you can have grounds to ask for stuff that you need and you want. These loans, these grants, all these different things. You're going to need all these pieces. You're going to need to put together a budget. You're going to need to know something, because you can't just, oh, I guess I spent like $300 on some soil. No.
Right.
You need to think about your starting situation and your continual operating situation, especially if you want to make this something that's going to have some longevity and going to keep going.
Yeah.
So you have to have some business about yourself. Trust me, I'm being baptized by fire with all of this stuff, because as a creative, these are things I've never really had to learn, but I'm having to learn these now. And I think that, you know, surrounding yourself with people that have those skills as well, because honestly, my business team and my accounting team are people I used to take care of. They're all old guests that used to follow me from restaurant to restaurant. So how full circle is that? You know, people that you used to take care of are now taking care of us. You know, it's really, really great. Number 9, you have to give to build and save community. So if you're coming to a neighborhood with this garden, your whatever, get to know the people around you. You know, who knows, maybe if you guys grow some extra herbs, you can drop these off at your neighbors. These are the neighbors that are going to protect that garden. They're going to make sure nobody is supposed to be out there is out there. You know, it's give and take. If you're going to be in their space, let them know who you are, invite them to your stuff, keep it all going.
Right.
You know, we all need each other. We all need each other. And how awesome would it be, like, say if you have yours in a neighborhood with like a firehouse or a police station, introduce yourself to these people. They'll make sure nothing happens to your area, you know? And who knows, the fire truck, they might come and water your garden for you. I don't know. But you know, you want to involve people, especially when you start having these fundraisers and these campaigns. These are the same people that come out here and support you, you know, and you never know what your small gesture can do for someone else, you know? Last, and my favorite, number 10. Well, it's not necessarily my favorite, but I think it's the most important lesson out of everything here. Things have to die in order for things to live. It's the circle of life. It happens in business. It happens in every facet of everything. Things have to die. And that means, like, say we come out, you cultivate your land, you get it all ready, you plant all of these tomatoes, and you don't get not one tomato, or you get maybe 1 or 2 tomatoes. You can't take that personally, because that wasn't, you know, the thing. You didn't personally do this. You can't take that personally. You know, who knows, maybe all of those things are happening to get the soil ready, and the next year you're gonna have more tomatoes than you can doggone stand, you know? So you can't take it personally, you can't quit, you have to keep going, because some of these things just kind of happen. What do you think?
Sorry, that threw me off guard. Things have to die in order to grow. But I take that as a just similar to, you know, when one opportunity is missed, it, you know, opens up the opportunity for something else bigger and better to happen. And like I say all the time about gardening, there's bound to be casualties. Like, things are gonna die. You're gonna snap off a branch of something by accident when you're trying to prune. You know, don't let it discourage you. Just keep on going. It's a learning curve. You know, Mother Nature comes back every year with this production for you. So, you know, take your time, be patient with yourself and your surroundings, and just trust that with practice, you'll absolutely get there. Anybody can have a green thumb.
Exactly. You know, you didn't come your first day on the barn, you knew everything, right? No, it took time, and you had wonderful days, and you had days where you broke a glass in the ice and you had to, you know, burn the ice and you knocked over some, like everybody's had it, but you still get up and you keep going. You go back to work. So even if a cocktail dies, a plant dies,
yeah,
keep going.
Learning experience. That's all it all is.
I think
They are
that's it.
such great tips. Oh my God, the thought of just crashing an ice well though just sends shivers down my spine.
Oh my God, it's the worst. And it always happens when you're busy. It never happens when you're dead. It happens when you're busy.
They were such great tips, thank you. And what I love about them is that when we think of gardening, obviously we're talking about setting up a community garden, and there is the lovely side of it. And I know Sarah is going to wax lyrical about planting at the moment, which I'm so excited about because, you know, that's such the beautiful stuff, but there's all this background stuff that you also need to be aware of, and the practical side of things of actually how do you set it up and how do you go about it. And it's funny because I feel that quite a few of the topics that you just spoke about there aren't just set for gardening, but can also be rules for life as well. So I quite like that interchange within them. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over to Sarah, who's going to fill in some more detail into this about now that you've set up your garden, what are you going to plant in there? And there is no better person to speak to you about this than Sarah. So Sarah, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then onto the intelligent gardening.
I just want to just say how brilliant it is just to hear you two guys, Rori and Keyatta, talking about this, because sometimes I do feel I sit and talk to myself quite a lot of the time, and all of those things that you outlined are things that I have found, you know, over the years have become vital about organization, about planning, about how to find land, how to work alongside people and stuff, because we too have been building gardens, but in a very different way. They're not collaborative gardens, they're pollinator gardens, and we use volunteers. But, you know, lots of the same considerations apply to us. So as Georgie said in her introduction, we're beekeepers, and that's where we come from in terms of thinking about gardening. Is we're trying to up the forage availability for pollinators. That's particularly acute in London, but lots of other places as well. We have friends in Berlin, in Paris, in New York, suffering from exactly the same thing, is that people have, by mistake, by misunderstanding the message of Save the Bees, piled beehives into urban settings. And what's happened is you get a complete overload of beehives and you get pressure put on the wild pollinators. Because if you look at my slide, you'll see that there's 4 bee-like objects there. The top left-hand one is the honeybee. Most people would think it was the right-hand one because they do like a fluffy job, but that's a bumblebee. The one below that on the left is an ashy mining bee. And the one to the right of that isn't a bee at all. It's a hoverfly. They're very good at mimicking bees. So just looking at the bee world alone, there's 25,000 species of bee worldwide, and only 7, and that is 7, not 7,000, but 7 species are honeybees. So everyone's all caught up in the honeybee story. They think that they're going extinct. They're not. They've never been more honeybees on Earth because they're a man-managed species. And there's over 91 million hives currently globally, according to the UN's figures. The problem is the pressure that they can place on the wild pollinators in areas where there's very dense hives. So when we talk about planting for honeybees, we're talking in the same breath about talking, in fact, for the wider world of pollinators. And in terms of your garden, these are the creatures that are going to make your garden productive. So there's the most wonderful to and fro that you're going to gain by planting for pollinators. You're going to get better levels of produce, but you're also creating safe havens for all sorts of pollinators, from the honeybees to the bumbles to all those other particular native bees, which are so special. So I came to this because I'm allergic to honeybees. So when my husband started his beekeeping practice, which is now about 17 years ago, the one thing he couldn't do was press me into service as an assistant beekeeper, because otherwise I would have never seen the light of day again. I would just be like this little person following him around doing as I was told, not my cup of tea doing as I'm told. But I interested myself in other things. So honey, and as Georgie said, I'm a honey sommelier. but also the planting, because that's where it comes from. It comes from the soil. This bounty that we take, this honey, comes from the soil. Everything that we're eating, it connects in that way. It's really crucially important to understand that the honey isn't a thing that comes off a supermarket shelf. It's a true product of nature, like wine, like olive oil. It's subject to the terroir. So what you plant for pollinators in your garden is what they're going to use to look after themselves and their babies, and in the honeybee's case, if they can spare it, to give you a little bit of honey at the end of the season. So that's where I come from. This is how we started finding patches of land to plant on, was really to try and offset any impact our honeybees might have on the environment, and to make sure that they were well nourished, but also so were the wild pollinators. So my family are great gardeners, and I spent most of my childhood like this. I do not listening. I don't want to pick up stones. I don't want to weed. I don't want to go and get the lettuce for lunch. I just want you to leave me alone. Like
I think we all did that though. I remember being like, I am not gardening. No way.
Exactly. So I think it went in one ear and out the other. But the other thing that I think I felt very strongly as I grew up, and I've worked with an awful lot of plants firms. I used to work for the Flower Council of Holland. I've worked for seed companies. I've been in and around that natural world. And I always felt that gardening was something that was really nothing to do with me, because it was all full of Latin terms, and it was full of all these specifics, and it was very success oriented, very much about success. And I just felt inadequate and poorly equipped, and just not someone who had a voice in this. This has changed for me, and it sounds like you guys, Keyatta and Rori, this part of your journey as well is understanding that we are all entitled to garden and to fail and to take that in our stride and to do better next time. So we've had to really, London is a very crowded city, and we've had to be incredibly resourceful. And also for an awful lot of people in urban areas, gardening is limited to what you can fit, just a few little pots on your windowsill. But there's a really clever way to make those count in terms of pollination in the environment. So on the left here in this slide, the intelligent gardening slide, what you're seeing is us opening up a strip of land that just is where a park, an urban park, meets a very old housing estate behind. I call this marginal gains, and we do that an awful lot. Nobody's going to miss that strip. We negotiate with the local authority. They give us permission. We open it up. We use the volunteers that you're seeing there are all from London bars and restaurants, and they're having a day out with us, learning about the soil. Most of them had never put a hoe or a spade in the ground before, let alone planting. But we had a big job to dig this out before we could plant anything. It's an incredibly productive and lovely space again, but also it established a template that we could reproduce in lots of other places. And in the spirit of absolute sharing, I hand that template out and my planting lists to anybody who wants it. This is not proprietary. This is free, to anyone who wants to try and do the same sort of thing. So, you can use whatever space you can get, or you can negotiate. Again, as you guys were saying, we have negotiated with private individuals, with corporates, with councils, with all sorts of people, just to get a little patch of land, or to help other people get a patch of land, and to mentor them to do similar things and plant for pollinators. So you're resourceful, you're keeping your eyes open, you're looking around the neighborhood for places that perhaps aren't being used, or you could put some stuff in. And I think very importantly, to say, we're not putting patches of wildflowers in, we're creating structural plantings, and usually food crop plantings, because those can be used by the local schools to have a look at where food comes from. People can gather some rosemary on their way home for their evening cocktail or meal. Again, this is interactive with our community. It's open to everybody to come and look at the bees that are in there, whatever it may be. It's open, it's in open space. And working with Mother Nature is also something that I really, really feel is important. You want to be relaxed, you want to experiment, you want to find the stuff that, as you're saying, works in your zones or in the soil that you've got, or you start to think about how you might improve that soil naturally to grow maybe a few more things, or do better next year with a crop that's gone a bit on you. And it's that thing of not being afraid to say, what, nothing, that didn't work. I just want to just move on to something else. And gardening essentially is not about ticking off boxes or about, you know, that this thing of this success-driven gardening that so freaked me out. As everybody said, you know, Georgie and you guys, it's for yourself. It's for yourself and the joy of being there with covered in soil. I'm such a messy gardener. If I go out in the garden, I come back, you know, I'm a mess and I'm happy. I'm so happy. I have to go straight in the shower and, you know, scrub myself from head to foot because I lose myself in the garden, in the soil, and in the joy of it. And that happiness is what, you know, that mental freedom that it gives us just to be ourselves out in the space is really such a joy.
Maybe Sarah, you could tell us a little bit about that soil actually, because I know that's a big topic that we need to discuss, isn't it? Because soil isn't just soil, there is soil health.
Yeah, I think as I've got older, I've really started to look much more at ways in which even if you haven't got a lot of space, you can have effectively a closed cycle, and you can enrich your patch without recourse to putting any you know, even non-chemical fertilizers onto it. You know, it's so much better to actually generate stuff yourself. You know, I know Keyatta and Rori, you know, they've got compost heaps and stuff, and they're doing brilliant work, which you're going to talk about later, aren't you? Just so inspiring. But I don't really have that facility at all. So I'm trying to, you know, be organic. So there are no chemicals that go onto the soil. I'm growing green manure products like Facelia. I sprinkle that everywhere, so it excludes weeds, and then I gently turn it into the soil. I'm not doing deep digging because that starts to disturb the microorganisms. I'm treating the soil with incredible care and respect, and I'm putting stuff onto it to enrich it in a very gentle and natural way, and never, you know, overloading it with nutrients either, because a lot of the wilder things that I grow, because the pollinators do like wilder things, they don't like over enriched soil. It actually doesn't make them very happy. So I do have to be a little bit careful. But yeah, the principle of the biodynamic principle of seeing your garden as a single organism, that's the thing I'm really working on trying to understand, because for me as a beekeeper, a hive is a single organism. You know, that it's really interesting to be able to see the components, and you can extend that to the people who are working alongside you in your garden. You become a single organism devoted to a single purpose. So that's, you know, that's another sort of a lovely way in which you join up with nature and just let things just easily take their space. And you're not going to have the best soil in the whole world straight away just because you want it. It's a building thing, and you've got to work quite hard at it, but then you start to see the results. We had this brilliant conversation, didn't we, at the tech rehearsal about worms.
But they're needed. They're needed. They're needed. They're needed.
And you know, for me, there's two things I know when I've succeeded in a gardening space. One is when I see a huge diversity of pollinators there. I know I've done my job, not just honeybees who will feed on anything, but all the little picky ones who maybe just only feed on 2 or 3 species. But also if I just turn the soil over and it's full of worms, I know that that soil is absolutely rich and glorious, and you know, you have that glorious, that's job done. You know, that's really important. I know I've made progress on something that was barren to turning it to something that's hugely productive. So there's
might need to come around to mine then, because I don't think I've got enough worms then in my soil. But I know we'll talk about composting and bar waste later. That will help.
It's really interesting. So there's one key concept that anyone who's trying to grow for pollinators needs to really, really get on board with. This is something that naturally happens within kitchen gardens anyway, but it's the concept of clumping. So in nature, things grow in dense patches. So on this slide, the clumping side on the far left is a tree. It's a crabapple tree. Now that is providing what is called 3D forage. And for an awful lot of pollinators, that is the way they forage. They forage on a single type of flower at a time. Certainly honeybees do, a lot of bumblebees do. And in fact, you know, it's like a really nice dish for pretty much any pollinator who's attracted to it. Now, if you then take that into people's normal gardens and they've got a mixed pot of this and a mixed pot of that and some dreary this and that, you're starting to lose the impact that you could really have if you clump. So You know, again, in these slides, what I'm showing is here is a wonderful, wonderful, great, huge area of Nepeta, catmint. And this is really the concept, and it's the way that things grow in the wild. We talk about a patch of this, a drift of that. You know, this is what nature tends to do, is to have things growing all together, and that's in tune with the way that pollinators have evolved over millions and millions of years to feed. So if we relax and allow our gardens to look a little bit wild and to clump things, the third slide here is a local park. We've been working with these park authority for a very long time to get them to plant, not in rigid rows of bedding plants, but in this softer, more natural style of clumping, with the ideal of about a metre square of something. Obviously you can't do that if you've got, you know, small gardens, but you know, that's the ideal. This is our allotment here, and you will see that it's naturally clumped. I have to say, this is it at its tidiest. It is usually nothing like as tidy as that. I must have taken a photograph of it just because it looks so damn tidy. And you know, if you're only planting in pots, say you just got a patio or a terrace or something, you can do that. You just put single species into each pot, then you can arrange them, you can style them, you can do whatever you like. It's lovely. And if you translate that into a slightly bigger garden, you get this lovely informal open style of gardening, which is quite wild, and has been pioneered by people like Piet Oudolf. His work is just fantastic in terms of the pollinator gardens that he's made. If you're growing herbs, yeah, put the thyme in one pot, the oregano in another, the basil in another. Don't just try and shove them all together, which is what people's tendency is. Grow less, but more of it, if you want to really help pollinators. So that you get that sort of look, instead of, you know, to the right hand side, there's a, you know, sweet little trough with some Allisons, some marigolds, some this and some that. That is quite an ask from pollinators. It looks very natural and freeform. It's actually not. It's a bit of a construction. So I'm asking people to sort of move away from that towards a more natural look that actually chimes with the way that pollinators actually feed. And so I've also been working on, inspired by you guys, I have to say, formalizing sort of the idea of a bartender's pollinator garden. So something that meshes what you're doing and what I'm thinking. And it is just so brilliant to be able to plant for the bar and for biodiversity as well. So these 88 million years on Earth, the bees have been here, and they evolved from trees and from bushes and from, you know, herbaceous perennials, and so, you know, that answers an awful lot of what we eat as human beings, what we use, our resources. So we take the currants from the currant bush, the apples from the apple tree. You know, this immediately starts to get you into an area of produce. So you know, our requirements and the pollinators' requirements are bang on the same. We just need to just pick the right things. So that fresh produce that comes out of the garden obviously offers a huge amount of potential in terms of creating unique drinks, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, doesn't matter. And that pollinator, you know, produce can be used in so many ways. So I mean, my, you know, immediate thoughts with juices and purees, infusions. I mean, you can have rose hips from your wild rose bush, raspberry leaf tea from your raspberries after you've eaten the fruit. There's, you know, there's lots of bits of the plant that actually answer stuff that you can make, and ferments and shrubs, and you can get into meads and melons. All this is just this wonderful bounty, drawing both on tradition in terms of what our ancestors would have made with this stuff for their home pharmacy and for their, you know, to drink or to eat, but also, you know, I'm sure you guys have got like a million other uses for this sort of produce. But the simple thing is, if you're growing to actually supply a bar, you can also be growing stuff that really makes the pollinators happy. So just as some very simple starting ideas, all of which are things which, you know, could go straight into use, either as edible flowers or as herbs. The important thing, and again, we talked about this, there is one area in which the kitchen gardener and the pollinator gardener are going to go like this and diverge entirely, and that is on the subject of letting your herbs flower. Because generally in the kitchen garden, pinch the tops off to keep it sweet, to keep the produce sweet. I've evolved from not understanding that, which took me 2 years to work that one out, honestly, has thick, to planting 50-50. So 50% for my kitchen, 50% for the bees. I would let it flower. I have to say, I just let it all flower now. I mean, I just take what I can when it's sweet, when it's young. I will take the leaves. Then I will let it flower. I will then cut the flowers off and the leaves. I will dry it all, and I'll use it as herb teas through the winter. That's fine. That's everybody has to work a different way, but you have to let them flower, because otherwise they're not used to anybody. Edible flowers, of course, we can use those for decorations, or you could use the rose petals make fantastic infusions and syrups or whatever. There's one really fun one here, which is thistles. So the blue thistles, the eryngium, the sea thistles they're called sometimes, have an edible root, which people used to candy and just eat as candy. I am so sure there's a use in a bar for this. I mean, if people look up the eryngium, I'm absolutely certain this needs to be rediscovered, because they're a brilliant plant, and there's that root waiting to be rediscovered from history. Fruits are an obvious thing. Climbers are something that people totally forget about. You've always got that upright dimension. Anywhere that you've actually got a garden, unless you just dug a patch out of a big lawn. And you can smother that in all sorts of very, very productive things like passion flower. Blueberries like to grow up, honeysuckles, honeydew melon. There's just lots of stuff that can grow on that dimension, which means that actually you can afford to have, less land. In my marginal gains thing, I can actually open up less land, beg less, because I'm going to use that upright, or put in some screening and use uprights there. So it's just a thing that sometimes gets overlooked. So top tips on your following up on yours. If seeds are too much, because sometimes it's really depressing if your seeds don't just grow, and you have to learn that some things germinate in different ways and stuff, and it can be heartbreaking, can't it? So there is always, you can buy plant plugs, and you can start gardening quite quickly from those. Ideally, you'd get them from an organic nursery. It's not one where the roots were soaked in insecticides already. Watering is so important for those baby plants. It really is just crucial, and it's overlooked sometimes in the excitement of you lay out this fabulous garden, you plant it up, and then wander away, and 2 weeks later think, oh my Lord, they need water. So you've got to plan for how you're going to water your garden, and make a good regime of watering right from the very beginning. Also, plants that are not well watered will not give nectar to pollinators, because they can't spare the energy. So they really do need to have the water. I always start with the basis of perennials, and that's my framework for a garden. And then the annuals, which are the ones that only flower every year, I just pop in and out when I feel like it. But those perennials are the stalwarts of any garden, and they're the ones that feed pollinators best. So the rest is the annuals are like the icing. They're the icing on the gingerbread of the garden. Be smart with your container planting. That you can use. There's so many different ways that you can do it. You can rearrange them the whole time. And also, gardens are not just, we're so focused on spring and summer produce. There are plants which actually can give you great produce, and which flower and provide pollen in late autumn and into early spring. Sometimes in the dead of winter, you have to accept there's nothing for pollinators, but very soon after the turn of spring, of winter rather, very soon after Christmas, there are things which can start to be productive. Don't forget climbers, we talked about that. Don't lose heart. I think we're all saying that a lot, aren't we? Do not lose heart. Don't take failures personally. I always say, look, if it doesn't work for you, take it out, gift it to somebody else's garden, let them have a go, or put it in a pot and move it to a spot somewhere else in the garden. See if it's a little happier there, maybe, if you don't want to part with it straight away. Garden without chemicals, we're all saying that loud and clear, I think. Nettles equals nettle tea. There are lots and lots of things in the garden that can go back into your closed system. If you've got nettles, if you brew those up in a bucket and stuff and put those onto your, they have so many functions. There's lots of other plants too. So reading up on organic gardening can lead you into these wild and wonderful things of companion plantings and stuff. It's really worth taking the time to do that. And if you haven't got time for a compost heap, there are wormeries. They can be tricky. We've discussed that before, I think. But there is also a Japanese concept called bokashi, which I'm really interested in investigating, which uses fermented bran. And you have 2 bins, and it allows you to actually compost a lot more stuff than some systems do. It's really efficient at breaking it down, and it's great for small spaces. So it's something that I'm finding really interesting for the future. And I'm handing back to Georgie now.
Thanks, that was so good. We have so much to talk about. I'm just conscious of time, and we've got just a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to speed through this last bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to share all of these tips with everyone that's joined the seminar. So not only the slides and our top tips, but Sarah's got some pieces printed out, and we'd also love to share with you the pieces about transferring your bar waste into garden health, which includes reusing eggshells, dehydrating banana peels, which I know Rori is a huge fan of. She's got some, you got some there quickly to show?
Yeah, sorry, we were on mute. But yes, this is dehydrated banana peels. Just, I believe I used my dehydrator to dry them out. But then once they were dried, I cut them and then just ground them up in my spice grinder. I have one separate from my coffee grinder for obvious reasons. But you can either make a banana leaf tea with this, so just like let this steep in water overnight and then transfer that to a spray bottle to spray your plants and soil for added potassium boost. But I just use this dry dust and just sprinkle it right on top of my potted plants and even some of my outdoor plants too, just for that added nutrient boost, a total natural way to go. And then also spent coffee grounds. We use those a lot at the garden. We have a huge compost bin, as was previously mentioned. So we don't necessarily add the grounds directly to the plants in the ground, we add them to our compost. So they can break down and add, more nutrients to the soil itself.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And there's some photos of the compost bins that we'll show on one of these slides. So with that in mind, I'm going to wrap up this session because God, we could sit here for hours, and I wish that we could. As I said before, we're very lucky that our sponsor for this was Aberfeldy. And this year, Aberfeldy has teamed up with Bee Conservancy, which is a non-profit organisation dedicated to protecting bees, safeguarding the environment, and securing food justice through education, research, habitat creation, and advocacy. They run beekeeper workshops and courses, teaching you about bees and what they need in their environment to thrive, which is the part that we've been focusing on today, and have on hand a network of gardeners across the USA to help plant and manage pollinator-friendly flora in community and corporate spaces. Now, this year for National Honey Month, we're actually giving hospitality venues across the US not only planters, Aberfeldy planters, but support from the gardening gurus from the Bee Conservancy to create clumping gardens that will both feed the bees and provide garnishes, ingredients for delicious cocktails, such as the Aberfeldy Honey Herb Smash that uses mint and basil. And to Sarah's point, you can let half of it grow and use for the bar, and then let half of it flower. And that's definitely what we do at home as well. If you would like to learn more about this and how you can get involved, please contact me, or if you know anyone from the brand team, please contact them. But please email me. Our contact details will all be on this Tales seminar, and we'd love to work with you on this to bring it to life a little bit more and to share this joy. Now, I personally have learned so much from these wonderful queen bees, not only in this session, but in the prep leading up to this seminar. And I just have to thank them for sharing their wisdom. They are fonts of knowledge on these subjects. They've definitely inspired me to be much more green-fingered when it comes to going outside and gardening. I was telling them the other day that there's a plot of land at the top of my road which is disused, that I've been badgering the council about to see if I can set up my own community garden up there. And this has inspired me more than anything to push that agenda forward and really go out, help pollinators, but help build my local community too, which I think this is the wonderful thing. So with that in mind, thank you, Keyatta, Rori, and Sarah for being part of this Grow Your Own Community panel. I can't wait for us to have maybe non-alcoholic or alcoholic number while gardening together one day.
Yes.
Yes, we have to figure this out.
Yeah.
We definitely will. And thank you again so much to Tails for putting this on, and also to all of you for watching this as well. As we mentioned before, if you have any questions from this, because we did skirt over quite a lot and we skipped out a few bits just because of time, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Our Instagram details are on here. I know that Sarah, Rori, Keyatta, I'm sure you're happy for people to contact you with more questions about the subject, any gardening tips, how to revive plants, what the right plants are to plant at different times of the year. But without further ado, thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your tails.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.